I'm trying to just warn people about the ship sinkers, the things that can like utterly ruin them. Because, you spend all this time, you build up a portfolio, you get really good at real estate. And like, what's the point of it? Is it to like, have something to do to build? No, you're building wealth. You're building generational wealth. There's a lot of people that have had all of that completely stripped away. And you don't hear from them a whole lot because it's friggin' embarrassing. It's like shameful. People carry a lot of shame with. Like, I had people that were crying on Zoom calls because of just the emotional distress that it causes. And dude, I was like shook by that. If there's one thing that like I feel like I can really help people with, it's avoiding the ship sinkers.
All right, George, man, I'm excited. You're a Go Abundance member, which we put together today, and then at the same time, you've been in real estate for I think 20 or so years. But you're on here today. We're going to talk about something very different. We're going to go into the squatter, uh, you know, pandemic crisis, however we want to label it, and then the deep fraud that's happening around title. So I'm excited. Like, let's kick it off.
Yeah, man. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Where
Yeah.
do you want to start? Like, I mean, obviously the squatters is what I got really excited about when we first talked, because I think it's becoming it's from the property manager space here for me, it's becoming a problem for us. And it's squatters that just people that just move right in. And then there's the squatters that move in and say they've been scammed, and then you got to deal with a whole nother set of kind of roadblocks. So
Right.
talk to us about kind of what you've been seeing.
Yeah, so I guess first thing I want to do is like define what a squatter is, because there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes they say like, "Oh, hey, this guy hasn't paid rent for 6 months. I've got a squatter." And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, you don't have a squatter. You've got a guy who's not paying rent, and that actually is a different thing. That guy, at least at one point, had the contractual right to occupy the property, and now he's not paying you, and that's really bad. But yeah, your options are a whole lot more limited with that guy than they are with a squatter. Squatter is somebody who just enters a property and usually making some claim to the property, like, hey, I have rights. I have the right to be here. And more often than not, it's by a way of claiming tenancy, essentially. Like they've been here for a certain amount of time, which, like, under statute, entitles them to some bundle of rights. Or, hey, I've got this lease, and like, hey, the lease might be completely fake. Or you've got like people live in their furniture. Like he's cast like a shadow of a doubt, like, hey, maybe he actually, could be a tenant. So that's enough to fool a law enforcement officer who comes to the door and he's got a he said, she said situation. Like, hey, this guy's saying he owns the place and he's never seen this guy before. And the other guy's saying, like, yo, I got this lease, I got the utilities in my name. Yo, I don't know what this guy's on about, but I have the right to be here. And possession, as we all know, is 9/10 of the law. And you got a cop who's thinking, like, boy, do I really want to put my job on the line to, yank this guy like potentially out of his house and arrest him if he's just like a regular tenant. We got this, landlord or owner who's a bad actor. Like, maybe you guys got to sort this out in court. I'm not going to put my neck on the line for you, for either one of you guys. So sort it out in court, and I'm going to take a hike. And that's what's been happening. And squatters and criminals, they use the internet just as much as we do. And they're finding out that they can pull this scam off and do so with impunity. So because of that, the whole thing is just proliferated nationwide, worldwide, actually, anywhere with landlord tenant law.
Where's this taking? Where are you seeing this be most harmful, or what parts of the country is this happening most at? Obviously, it's happening here in Chicago, but where's it worse right now?
So any place, so it's really anywhere. Like a lot of times people hit me up from red states being like, hey, we don't have this problem over here in, Idaho or Arkansas or Louisiana. I'm like, yeah, you absolutely do. Because what happened was after it went viral with the I Stole a House video, I started getting contacted by everybody because the video got tens of millions of views worldwide. And everybody figured out who I was because a lot of it got reposted. They link back to my profile sometimes, but usually not. And they figured out who I was and say like, hey man, have I got a story for you? And I'm like, I'm listening. So I started hearing all these different squatter stories. And dude, they came in from everywhere. Red states, blue states, big cities, small towns. And the reality is if you've got a squatter in a blue state or a blue municipality, you're probably going to have a tougher time getting rid of them if you go through the judicial system, simply because those municipalities are much more tenant friendly. The landlord tenant law tends to favor them a whole lot more. And these policies, I think, in a lot of times are misguided because they result in the exploitation of the policies, which result in more and more squatters. So, do you get more squatters in blue areas? Yeah, you probably do. Do you get an absolute, are red areas devoid of them? Oh, heck no. If I had to ascribe, I've never actually ascribed like a percentage, but I would say that it's in favor of the blue, but not by as much as you might think.
Talks about the video that went viral because that was a big jumping point off point for you.
Yeah, that was that kind of changed my life, honestly. And so what happened was, so I live in Portland. I'm very middle of the road politically, but where things really touch a nerve for me is when it concerns my personal livelihood. And my livelihood, like you mentioned before, I've been in the real estate game for 20 years. Most of my investing has been in appreciation markets on the West Coast, including Portland, mainly Portland, actually. And even though I've never had like a full blown, terrible squatter, knock on wood, I've had plenty of guys like wander into my projects, houses under construction or flips or whatever, and I've gotten rid of them, pretty easily because I just point to the door and they're addicts and they just kind of wandered in there. But many people I know that are in my community, in the real estate community, have been victims of like actual full blown squatters that are pulling off the full scam, and they're going through the judicial system, and it's taken months or even years and tens of thousands or even six figures plus to get rid of them. So I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to make a video. I've had a pretty active social media presence, got a little bit of an audience. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to put this out there. And I impersonated basically a squatter. I said like, all right, this is how I stole a house in Portland, Oregon, and totally got away with it. And it completely just exploded. Everybody thought it was like me who actually did it. Funny enough, Mark, I was actually wearing a GoBundance hat in the video, and it got me in a teensy bit of hot water with the GoBundance admin. They're like, yeah, whatever, no big deal. But a couple guys kind of came at me. They're like, dude, what are you doing? Like pretending to commit crimes in a GoBundance hat. And I was like, yo, I did that as like an Easter egg, so people understood like, okay, this dude is like, it's like he's in a millionaires club. He's not going to be actually stealing houses. So I did that to like tip people off. Completely missed. I was completely wrong about that, but live and learn, right? But yeah, so it blew up. I got contacted by like News Nation, Dr. Phil, Fox News, went on a bunch of news programs and talk shows. And ever since then, I just realized that this is a massively underserved market. People don't know what to do. And all these conversations I had with owners nationwide, I'm like, I was just struck by just how helpless they felt and how they had no source of information. And I was like, this is a great opportunity for me. I'm like a lightning rod right now for this type of information on this topic in particular. So I just consolidated all of that information and I made a course called Squatter Defender. And now I'm just going on a big tour, making sure people know what their options are and how to combat squatting.
Yep. So before we even go there, though, can you give just some of the proactive things that owners and investors can do to try to avoid the situation in the first place, right? Because that's the best case scenario. We don't have to be here. So what are just some maybe a couple tips there for that person who's just buying their first 3 unit going like, whoa, this is scaring the shit out of me. Like, what should I do with my original lease?
Totally. And I hear people all the time, they're like, hey, this really scares me. I'm worried about this and should you be worried about it? Like, yeah, but as we all know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the ways that you can prevent it and get these ship sinkers off your plate, and the ship sinkers are like, your deed frauds, your squatters, your, getting sued by somebody who falls and hits their head or falls and doesn't hit their head, but pretends they do, and they do, and it outstrips your insurance. But these ship sinkers are the ones that I really think people don't pay quite as much attention to, as opposed to like the tenants and toilets. But the first thing that you can do, number one, is so how squatters get established is with time. No squatter is going to be able to get established if you know that they just walked in there, because you call the cops like 99% of the time. That's what you're going to do, is just call the cops, and the cop is going to show up. And if he encounters like a disheveled looking dude in an empty house with a broken lock, like clear signs of forced entry, like, yeah, that's open and shut. That dude is going to get arrested. But if he has time, then he's going to get established. He's going to move in his friends. He's going to charge them rent, get in some furniture, put the utility as his name, get a forged lease. That all this stuff comes with time. And the way you do that is that either you drive by your property and walk through it every single day, or you use technology. In Squatter Defender, we offer 50% off on a Simply Safe system. And so it gives you a free camera. It's portable. You just install it in whatever vacant unit you got, give it to your property manager, buy 2 of them. Because after 50% off, it ends up being like, I don't know, like $100 or something. It's really cheap. And that will tell you just through notifications on your phone, like there's someone in your property. And you're like, you pull up the camera. It's like, oh, it's Lenny the plumber. Forgot to let him in. No big deal. But then you go in, you pull it up and you're like, who the heck is that guy? Then, you use the talkback camera and you're like, who the heck are you? And they're going to know with like the blaring alarm, the motion sensor they see on the wall, you tell them to get the heck out of it. Like the jig is up. They're looking for low hanging fruit.
You just defined another house hacking strategy.
Oh, what's that?
Moving in and charging other people rent. It's another way to house hack
Oh
for
yeah.
Yeah,
squatters.
there you go.
Exactly. Yeah, squatter house hacking is actually pretty popular because it's not enough they're getting the free rent, but 3-bedroom house, might as well get a couple of your scuzzy buddies in there and charge them $400 a month and really just hit a home run on the deal, right?
Yeah, there you go. Go on a podcast and talk about it.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
So let's talk about I've seen some situations where, they give you have a tenant, they either move out, something happens, but they give their brother the key, right? Like someone else has a key or someone, ex-girlfriend, whatever it is, they have an actual key to the unit. All of a sudden they're there. They're not on the lease. They're not an additional occupant on the lease. Like talk about dealing with that situation.
Yeah, so when you've got there's tenants who have an unauthorized occupant and they stick around. Then you got squatters with their friends, and then their friends rent to other friends. And so you've got leases on leases on leases. And so if you have a contractual lease, that's a piece of paper between you and a person and a set of, people and pets and everything, then, that's a lease. And then there's implied leases. And this is sort of getting into like the legalese, and it changes state to state. But then there's things that are implied. Like if you stick around in a property for 30 days in some states, then you earn the rights of a tenant. And that's how some squatters get established. And if, Uncle Larry has been living there for 6 months and you just didn't ever know about it, then yeah, he's afforded rights at that point as a tenant as long as he can prove that he actually has been there the entire time. So yeah, that leads to a problem that's actually in a lot of ways worse than having a squatter. So if you'd rather have like a squatter or a non-paying tenant, in a lot of ways, I actually would kind of prefer a squatter because now that I know all the different ways that there are to actually solve that problem, you've got a bigger tool belt than you do by just with a tenant. Because with a tenant, you got one choice. You gotta evict them through the court system.
I
Yep.
think it's common knowledge here in Chicago now, but on the 5-day notices to put the tenant's name and all unknown occupants, because a lot of people got burned 5, 10 years ago, where it's like, oh, the sheriff shows up and the person that opened the door is not the person that was on the 5-day or in the eviction lawsuit. So the whole unknown occupants is what you add to the who you're actually filing the case against.
Oh boy. Yeah. No, that's always been down. There's the hot golden nugget of the day, I'd say. Unknown occupants. Put that on your eviction notices for those non-paying tenants.
Yep. So what are some of those tools in the tool belt, right? Like besides the court system, talk to us a little bit because I mean this is what you do now. This is the new gig.
Yeah, man, this is a fun little side hustle. I mean, I still am flipping houses and developing and everything, but this whole journey has been just really a really fun way. And I'm a real like I have kind of a short attention span, so I need to do new things. And so, but basically, when I was talking to those people who had their squatter problems nationwide, I asked them, I'm like, okay, so what did you do? And they're like, well, can I speak to you off the record? And I'm like, yeah, no, man, it's just 2 guys talking. Like, I'm not gonna say anything. Like, you saw my video, like you can tell I'm like maybe a little subversive. Like what's up? And they're like, well, we actually booby trapped the place. And I'm like, go on. And so I heard about what I've come to refer to as the unconventional methods. And so that's actually like, I think it's like a third of the squatter defender course is just the unconventional methods that I heard people doing. And so not all of them made it into the course. There's some of them that are like really terrible ideas, and I actually advise against them in Squatter Defender because, they introduce liability into the equation. So like if you rig up booby traps, if you set up like, like a bear trap on the front porch to like harm your squatter or like pull them out at gunpoint, these are all like the bad ideas in essence. Like there's some things that if you do it, you're going to potentially face legal ramifications. But with that said, there's other ones that are sort of like a little gray area. And yeah, I do have my favorites. One of my favorites, so introduction of animals to the property. We'll just give it like a full blanket. Snakes was one of them. Putting snakes down the chimney. I'm not sure where this guy got access to a large quantity of snakes, but he had it. And essentially, through snakes, another one was rats, another one was mice. If you introduce these animals to the property, then you can render the property like uninhabitable. And so, the squatter can say like, hey, this guy, put snakes in my property. And it's sort of like, well, maybe prove it. And they figure, hey, the jig is up and don't want to live amongst the snakes, and they leave.
It's messed up the world we're in. It'll be easier to get rid of rats than it would be to get rid of people after on the cleanup of this
Oh
problem.
yeah. Yeah, the rats are much neater and cleaner than most squatters, actually.
What's that's pretty funny. What's another one?
Boy, I think another one of my favorite stories was when there was not an introduction of animals to it, but this is an owner who sort of like, knew what he was up against with regards to the law enforcement officer potentially being duped. He showed up at his property and saw like, signs of activity, like, there's somebody there, like car in the driveway, like toys in the front yard. And he's like, or no, sorry, no toys in the front yard, but a car in the driveway, and there was a guy in the house. So he answers the door and he says, "What's up?" And he's like, "Hey, this is my house. What are you doing? Get the heck out of here." And he's like, "Oh no, this is my place." So the owner like looks inside, and the guy's like kind of like has some like rudimentary belongings in there. Like he's got like he's got some stuff like a bed on the floor and a mattress, and so it looked like it was kind of marginal, but it looked like the guy had kind of gotten established in there, and he could make the case to a cop that like he actually did live there. And I think he actually told the owner as much. So what the owner did was after the squatter slammed the door in his face, he kicks in the door and just bashes it like off its hinges. So and the squatter's like, "What the heck are you doing?" So, and the owner doesn't come inside the house and run the risk of, being attacked. He just calmly like walks back to his car and calls the cops and says, "Hey, looks like there's a guy who's broken into one of my rental properties. And, it looks like the door's been kicked in and yeah, he's there. You guys better come quick." So the cops show up, see signs of forced entry, and they arrest the guy.
Oh.
What are you
So
thinking there?
Because if you're
yeah,
going to fight the battle of he said, she said, it could benefit both sides. I guess that's kind of what the moral of that story is, I guess.
yeah, no, you basically, I mean, you're essentially fabricating evidence to prove what is already true. So yeah, there's you could say that you know, you're making the cop's choice of what to do in that situation just a whole lot easier. They've got a choice of, whether to do nothing, arrest a guy, arrest the other guy. He's being brought into a situation, and if you can demonstrate, there's other people that have like smashed windows or just, really messed the place up. Be like, hey, looks like, this person really just jacked this place up and they've got no lease, and the officer just has more evidence than they did before. And, you know, if they have, a lot of times the officers actually kind of know what's happening, but they just don't want to get involved. And, because it's just going to sidetrack their police work, and, it can be worked out in court. So you just make it easy for them.
Yeah. We had a situation, we were buying a property that was almost in receivership. So it's REO, it's owned, and it actually had a squatter in it, right? So like
Mm.
the bank that's trying to sell it to us is dealing with the problem. And one of the cool solutions they did, they called the city on themselves. The city comes out. Now you pick up violations, but me as the guy who's going to rehab it on the back end, I don't really care. Like I'll take care of them. right? But the city came out and then deemed it, and they told them like, this is what we're doing. Please deem this inhabitable. And sure as shit, like they deemed it inhabitable, right? And then the
You
city
mean
escorted the
uninhabitable? Like so that nobody could inhabit it, or
correct, because it
oh,
was
gotcha.
like it was an RE, it was a slummy, like it was probably borderline inhabitable, right? They had
Yeah,
just been
yeah.
there partying but wouldn't leave. So
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, no, I actually hadn't heard that one. See, I'm still hearing about all the different ways to do it.
Because if you don't have, I think this is true in all 50 states, if you don't have running water, the house is inhabitable.
Hmm.
So if there's ways around that as well too.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. No, that's a clever way to do it. Yeah, all the different like little clever ways. One reason I started taking all these meetings with these squatter victims was I was just dead curious because it seems like I was seeing some patterns for sure, but you just never know what you're gonna get. And you hear these like really genius methods. And in the unconventional portion of the squatter defender course, um, I actually say like, all right, this one, probably not a great idea. This one, actually, I actually love this one, and here's why. And and so I'm honest with people. I say like, hey, at your own risk, can't endorse any of these, but this one's pretty rad.
Now Florida is they've had some laws come out recently
Oh
to
yeah.
help landlords. Talked about that. Like, is that something that will catch on with a bunch of the other at least call it red states. But is that something you think is going to follow suit, or is Florida just way out there as normal?
I'm curious to see how that works out, and I think it's actually going to work out great. Well, House Bill 622, 623, something like that. Yeah, it went into effect, I want to say like early summer, late spring. And basically what it does is that if you've got a squatter, you file like an affidavit with like the sheriff's office, and it transfers like the liability, like, hey, yeah, we're gonna come get rid of this guy. But if you're like making this up, or he actually did have the right to be there, and like he later proves it, like, yeah, you're gonna get in trouble. But basically, it makes it so the sheriff can just, at the will of the homeowner, like just get rid of a squatter. Sort of like trust that he's telling the truth. And if that person comes back and says like, oh, hey, like, I actually was a tenant, and here's my contract, then there's hell to pay. But the reality is these these laws are meant to protect, tenants from bad landlords, like landlords that they're just gonna pull you out of the house and kick you out on the street, just for no reason. And that's not a good thing. We need laws for that. But the pendulum has swung way too far in the opposite direction. And it's resulted in tenants and squatters like really just exploiting the situation. So the Florida law basically swings it back so that squatters are they're essentially put out of business by this one law. And do I think it's going to catch on? Hopefully, yeah. I don't see it happening in places like Oregon or Illinois or any places that have very robust landlord tenant laws that protect the tenant. But in red states, yeah, I could see it. I could see it catching on for sure.
the the crazy thing about that law, it reminds me of the mechanics lien laws we have here. So if a contractor files a mechanics lien, they have the benefit of the doubt, and they usually you have to prove them wrong. But if they're wrong, there's pretty big consequences if they filed a false mechanics lien, which incentivizes them not to do anything false. So that's why I love about that Florida one. And just if we had some opportunity like that, even just you file that and it fast tracks to court. Like if the court's not the problem, it's how long it takes to get to court.
It's how long it takes to get to
Yeah,
court and all the
it's
little
never
continuances and
the judge usually knows what's going on too. And the attorneys all know what's going on when they're in the courtroom. Heck, the bailiff knows what the hell's going on. Like everyone knows in that courtroom what's going on. It's just the process to get there. That's the more painful part. And they either have to figure out something like Florida has, or help that be fast tracked to get into court faster.
totally. Yeah. And so it's under like basically the concept of like, let's make sure that, 99 guilty men go free to keep one innocent man from like, from going to prison. And it works in some situations, but other ones, no, not really. And that's why people are exploiting that system, because they figure that they're going to be ending up in court, and they can just keep kicking the can down the road. Number one, and number two, a lot of times they can hire free lawyers, either from like a government agency or government funded agency, or just independent guys who really have just they have expertise in shaking down landlords. Even if they haven't done anything wrong, they'll find holes in the lease and they'll basically just kind of hold them for ransom. And so that's actually a big part of the scam, is the exploitation of the judicial system.
Is there
Going back
any?
to it
I'm sorry. Go on.
real quick, just going back to the other thing too, is just getting it out of the sheriff's hands, right? Like you mentioned earlier, like this guy just wants to go home to his family. He's not going to take any unnecessary risks that can involve being suspended with, like, he has no incentive to help in that situation. Like it can
Right.
only go bad for him or
It can
her.
only go bad.
So
Yeah,
like there's no reason for him to get involved. And this takes that off their plate.
exactly. Yeah, no, they've got a piece of paper in their hand that says, go to this house, remove that guy, and there's nothing that they can get in trouble for at that point, unless, they do something terrible, and that's not going to happen. He's just going to show up and be like, hey, got this court order here. And that's what cops like working under, is like a court order, or somebody who's like, clearly robbed a bank. They don't like being like judge, jury, and jailer, out in the field. They gotta do their job as a police officer, and that's law enforcement. And they're not there to make those type of judgment calls on the fly, especially when it's a little marginal.
Yep. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just say I want to. I'm curious on the whole deep fraud and stuff like that. But if you got something more on squatters,
No, I
go
was
on.
gonna say that's the what else let's wrap up the squatters here. What else will investors who either download this or enroll in the program, just go ahead and give us a little bit more information. Like for someone who's
Sure.
interested, give them a little taste here.
Sure. So squatterdefender.com. It's a course you can finish in an afternoon. And like I was saying before, I just really condensed just all the information all about squatting into one just like 3 hour course. And by the end of it, you'll know more about squatting than your lawyer does or anybody you've ever met. So it covers prevention, detection, and ejection, how to keep squatters away, how to detect them, and how to get rid of them if you have it. And there's also an option to book a consultation with me, because every single situation is different. People say like, I got a squatter, like, what should I do? And I'm like, well, all right, well, explain the situation and I can give you some advice. Sometimes that advice is like, go through the court system. And that's not advice I love giving, but yeah, then there's cash for keys, which, really makes everybody want to hold their nose, because nobody wants to pay off a squatter. But and then there's a bunch of other methods that you can use. And so I talk about all of those in the course, so that when you actually do have a squatter, hopefully you don't, but if you're an investor, especially, it's only a matter of time, that you're prepared and you know exactly what to do. Because if you rely on your lawyer and your property manager, trust me, they're not going to be helpful. It's you're on your own. And so I recommend you check out the course. And actually, I have actually a discount code for you guys and your listeners. SUCI, Straight Up Chicago Investors. If you enter that
Cool.
discount code, then you can get 20% off the course.
All
Awesome.
right, it's good stuff.
So yeah, you guys want to talk about deed fraud? Love this one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
we're gonna move from squatters to the other hairy one here.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's hairy, all right. And so this one I actually found out about while I was interviewing people. I'd never even heard of deed fraud, but essentially, when I was talking with people, they're like, yeah, so I didn't actually have like a squatter, but the guy, moved in and he said that he owned the house, like he transferred the deed. I was like, oh, like adverse possession, and they're like, no, no, like he actually just like forged the deed. I'm like, how's that work? And so the whole thing got explained to me, and I went down this whole rabbit hole. I started like interviewing there's like a couple preeminent deed fraud attorneys. There's not a whole lot of them out there, but that's when I actually found out about the actual stories. And you can read about it in like news stories, but it never really like drills down on exactly what people are doing to commit the crime. And the more I found out, the more I thought to myself, like, holy crap, this is shockingly easy to commit, and you can steal the entirety of the home equity in someone's property relatively easily. And it's one of those things where it's about 10,000 cases last year. But like the year before that, there was like 5,000. The year before that, there was 2,000. So it's one of those things that's just like really starting to get big as more and more people are finding out about it. So I was like, so the entirety of your equity got stolen? It's like, yeah, no, I lost everything. It was like 300 grand. And I was thinking to myself, okay, how much money is actually at stake here? And I looked it up, and the average home equity in America right now sits at about 300 grand. And it's like $33 trillion in wealth, that's the biggest single source of wealth in the entire country is home equity. And turns out it can be stolen.
Walk us through a scenario. I guess how does that happen?
So,
Where's the vulnerability?
so there's multiple ways to do it, but the most like insidious and the most, I guess, foolproof crime wise is it goes like this. So I'm the title thief. I am going to, I see Mark's property. It's fully paid off. And I think to myself, like, okay, that one. So I go on the dark web. I get a fake ID with a full like name, social address of a stolen identity of just some schmo, some guy out there. And I go and I forge a deed. And a deed is just a piece of paper with a rubber stamp, grantor, grantee, notarized signature. You can forge a notary. You can forge that super easy. It's not forging $100 bill. So I forged the deed and I passed title from Mark or Mark's LLC to the guy on the fake ID, the guy whose identity I've stolen. So then so the title's in my name, title instantly transfers. So then I, look online to be like, okay, title is in the name of, my fake person, my stolen identity. So then I call Tom the wholesaler. I say, hey Tom, I just picked up this property, and I picked it up for 300 grand. I'll sell it to you for 305. And Tom looks on there, up on Zillow. It's like, oh, it's worth like 450. Oof, okay, yeah, I'm getting a steal of a deal on this. So Tom comes and goes and looks at the property, opens up escrow. Escrow says like, okay, wow, looks fake person, looks like you bought this place just like three or 4 weeks ago and you're making a little profit. And I was like, yeah, yeah, no, that works. So they send a notary out. That's a perfect match with the signature, and title passes over to Tom. And I take all of that equity, all of that entire 300 grand. There's no agents to pay or anything, little escrow fee. And it's in the bank account that I set up with that stolen identity. And I've basically made off with all of Mark's equity. And he doesn't know anything about it because there's no mechanism by which that he's notified that title has transferred out of his name. And he sometimes and people that this happens to, they don't find out about it for like weeks, months, years down the line. There's been houses that have been built on like stolen titles that have been then transferred. So so then Mark calls up the title insurance company saying like, "Yo, you're not going to believe this, but somebody stole my title." And title insurance says like, "Ooh, yeah, so here's the thing. Looks like you have an Alta owner's policy that covers fraud and that covers stuff like from the policy date like backwards in time, like not forwards. So it happened like after you bought the property. So yeah, you don't have coverage there. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, don't call us. We'll call you."
Wow. So this is we had David
This was the
Green on.
David Green example, right? Like
Yeah.
this is exactly what
Yeah, yeah,
happened.
David
We
Green.
had
Yeah.
we had David on episode 286, 280. We'll link to in the show notes, but this is exactly what happened to him. Like, and then one of those guys that on the end by actually approached him was like, "Hey, like, isn't this your property?" And then like by that time, 20 of them had already been done or whatever.
Yeah, the whole
Well,
thing
a
already
lot of
happened.
questions around this. Are you more susceptible if you're in an LLC versus owning it in your personal name?
Yeah.
All right, how long is the timeline? So you explained that. Like, what's it from the day the guy deeds it out or sells it, that first step to like you finding out what's typically like.
So I've recorded deeds in the past that didn't work. They've been rejected, and I've found out about that usually like a couple weeks after they've recorded. And the reason that happened for me is we basically filed two simultaneously, and they didn't like the second one because we botched the paperwork. But basically the county will reject these things, but it takes a minute, like a day, a week, a month, something like that. So if you're stealing the title and you want to make sure that it went through, you're going to the electronic records and like, okay, there it is, it's changed. And usually in some cases that takes like a day, and some municipalities it takes like a little bit longer. So but generally it's happening within a few weeks. And so then after title's in the thief's name, then he contacts the wholesaler, and wholesalers can typically close within like a couple weeks, something like that, enough for title to clear. So And if the guy is selling it for really cheap and he wants to close really quickly, that could set off some alarm bells. So if you're the thief, you're like, okay, can you close in like, 3 or 4 weeks? Because I mean, what's going to happen in that time? Maybe Mark finds out about it, but probably not. So yeah, about a month to 2 months, I would say, is about how much time you need.
This is
It sounds like
happening.
I'm giving advice to criminals right now, but
Well, no matter what, if they get from you, they get from somewhere on the internet. But this is
oh
happening.
yeah.
So 𝗏𝘃𝗃 told me he's a wholesaler here. He got a call from a guy to buy a piece of land, 150, but he looked it up. He saw the guy bought it for 210, like only like 4 or 5 months ago. But like it was so many red flags, and ultimately he found out that guy out. I don't know how he found out, but he found out that it was a scam, like you're explaining. So it's happening here, and I
Was that in
imagine.
Florida by any chance?
No, no, here in Illinois. So, but
I was
Florida
in
is
Illinois.
very susceptible. I've heard too, just because of how their laws are set up or how their system's set up. But the other
Yeah.
thing here, it's pretty common knowledge that if you buy something in Cook County, which is the county here in Chicago,
Yeah.
man, it takes. I mean, it could take you 2 or 3 months sometimes for that to even get recorded.
We've done quick turnarounds on flips, like almost like a clean out, like real, and like it still doesn't show in our name.
Yeah,
Right, like a 60-day turnaround. It's like, oh, this thing's still not recorded.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No,
what what
sometimes it
what's
takes a
what
minute.
what can you do to prevent this? Like, what's the preventative? Like, just going on the assessor site every day, checking to make sure
So
that tax bill's still coming to you.
yeah, no, so you just pull up your home title on your county page and you just push refresh with your morning coffee every morning and yeah, you're straight. And yeah, no, and do that for your entire portfolio and that'll do it. But basically, what I figured out is that you can't outright prevent it. That would take a complete like overhaul of like the entire like title recording system. And I am 100% in favor of that. But like this is governed by like some counties that have, 70 people in them, others that have millions. It's just not something that's going to be overhauled, to the blockchain overnight. So you, unfortunately, as of today, cannot outright prevent it. But ask yourself, like, so what's actually at stake here? And what's at stake here is your money, your equity. And if it gets stolen and there's no insurance to get it back, then you're in a really bad way, especially if that's like all of your money. There's a lot of people that their entirety of their wealth is just in home equity. So basically what I did is I started a company called Title Fraud Defender. And I say we can't prevent title fraud, but we prevent against the harmful effects of title fraud. And then basically what we do is we just check your title every single day. We got a robot that goes into those records and it checks it every single day. And if anything goes wrong or anything's awry, then it notifies you and says, "Hey, Mark, looks like the title changed on your property. Uh, was that you? Did you sell it? Because if not, like you got to act fast to make sure that nobody steals your equity." And then we basically, and Mark says, "Oh, well, actually, no, I didn't transfer it. Who is this guy? What? Help me." And we basically tell you what to do. There's a series of steps. You file an affidavit of false filing. You go to you got to do an action to quiet title. But the biggest thing you do is you prevent any of your equity from ever being stolen. It prevents further transfer from that point. So yeah, Title Fraud Defender is it's a few bucks a month. Our competition is charging like $20 a month. It's pretty crazy, but it's really targeted towards investors because it goes for like $5 a month to one property. But if you have like multiple properties, it goes down to like $2 a month or something. It's really cheap. Because we're really slick software. It's cheap to operate. So we can charge a whole lot less and have as good or better coverage. And I think I'm really encouraging like all my investor friends like, yo, it's a couple bucks. Like like buy what's essentially like an insurance policy for your equity at a couple bucks a month.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It might have been you. We were talking about this in our Go Pod a couple months ago about having issue. I said a few months ago when we were talking about David Green, but the yeah, they were talking about. I wonder if it was your product that came up in that conversation. So small world.
Could be, yeah. So the leader in the space is Home Title Lock, and they've I mean, near as I can tell, they basically do exactly what we do, and yeah, they just charge a whole lot more money, and they've got just a big marketing program. I'm basically just talking to investors, being like, "Yo, I'll do it for you. My software is as good or better than theirs. We're basically doing the same thing, and it's a whole lot less money." And then actually, while we're on the subject, that same discount code, SUCI, that actually will also get you 20% off for lifetime and on any subscription. So I'm telling investors, like, put your portfolio in there. You can swap out properties. If you sell one, buy one. You're allotted a certain number of slots. just backfill them, downgrade, upgrade. Doesn't, you can just pay as you go and get a long-term subscription. And so you don't have to worry about this happening, because what you don't want is to have all your equity stolen. And then, down the line, this whole thing is proliferated and everybody's scrambling to redo the whole title recording process. But meanwhile, all hell is breaking loose.
Man, the world's gonna have to start adding new lines to their pro formas of squatter protection and title fraud protection on their
Exactly. Yeah.
numbers they
No.
run.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
this world. That's
Put
where we're
that
going
on.
as world.
Go
Put that
back
in
to
your
the original
modeling.
example. You steal Mark's equity, like you're the criminal in that example. You go and you wholesale it to me, right? So now I have the property. You've walked away with the money that I've paid you for. Like I paid you 305. You didn't do it. You didn't do anything. Mark finds out a week later. What happens?
Yeah. So Mark has to go to a lawyer who specializes in this, and there's really only like a few of them that I've ever encountered. And you do what's called an action to quiet title, and that's essentially, it's a lawsuit to fix the chain of title. Because if you record a deed with any county in the country, you can't just call them up and be like, "Yo, you got to fix this." Like, chain of title is really sacred. It can only be changed with like a court order.
And you pay for that
So
in every settlement statement. I see that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So you got it, and so you basically, Mark has to go, essentially, get his title back. But who's he getting that from? He's getting it from the wholesaler who, thinks that he bought it fair and square. So yeah, and every case is completely different. Every scenario is different. But yeah, no, that
Does
it's
title
it's essentially a
insurance
lawsuit. A
does title
lawsuit.
insurance cover Tom the wholesaler? Does he get his 305 back? Like how does that work? Who loses
So
in all that money? If you got to fight to get your property back, which is there's tons of loss in there, but then there's that 300,000 that Tom spent.
So there's a few different ways that can play out, but Tom is the one who got the title insurance, right? And so he goes back and he goes to the title company and says, "Hey, looks like, I got frauded. This actually belongs to Mark." And so they check the policy and see if it covers fraud and impersonation, prior to the policy date. And, chances are pretty decent that it actually does. So Tom might get his money back, but Mark didn't purchase that policy. So so Tom is going to probably be okay, because he got frauded and then bought the property.
Yeah, so
Whereas,
it's previous, it's before purchase, because title, like you said, goes backwards. So
yeah,
potentially I would be covered there.
yeah, and there actually is a title policy that does cover fraud and impersonation after the policy date. It's just that not a whole lot of people have it, and it gets a little confusing. So stick with me here. The Alta owner's policy,
Hmm.
that's the policy that's probably on all you guys' HUDs. Go take a look
Yep.
sometime. And the Alta homeowners policy is a different policy. And if you go to the Alta website, it has one of those things with like little check marks and X's about, what it does and what it doesn't do. And the homeowners policy covers fraud and impersonation after the policy date. So as you might imagine, it's more expensive. So you spend a little bit more money on it. Well, actually, quite a bit more money. A lot of times it's like twice as much. But the thing is, most people that are buying houses and buying properties, they don't even know what title insurance is in the first place, let alone like what it actually, covers and actually does. So are they going to go to the out of the title officer and be like, "Hey, what are my choices for this
Yeah.
for insurance? Like, what sort of like, coverage do I have for this, that, and the other?" No, I've never, was a broker and still am actually for many, many years, working with hundreds of buyers, and that never came up. It never occurred to anybody to like shop in title insurance policies, because
Yeah.
they're essentially all selling the same one, every title company.
Man, crazy stuff. Thanks for scaring all our listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, all I'm doing, I think, is really like, I'm trying to just warn people about the ship sinkers, the things that can like utterly ruin them. Because, you spend all this time, you build up a portfolio, you get really good at real estate. And like, what's the point of it? Is it to like, have something to do to build? No, you're building wealth. You're building generational wealth. And there's a lot of people that have had all of that completely stripped away. and you don't hear from them a whole lot because it's friggin' embarrassing. It's like shameful. People carry a lot of shame with, like, I had people that were crying on Zoom calls talking about literally everything we talked about because of just the emotional distress that it causes. And dude, I was like shook by that. Like talking to these people that have had these horrible things happen to, and I'm like, they're people like the three of us, like you and me. And I'm thinking, like, holy Toledo, like, yeah, I've got insurance, yeah, I've got safeguards, I got guardrails, but if there's one thing that like I feel like I can really help people with, it's avoiding the ship sinkers. And these are two of them that scare the absolute bejesus out of me. And after coming face to face with the victims of these crimes, and I'm like, okay, like the actual odds of this happening, they're not super high, but they're not zero. And if you take like a 0.01% chance and you multiply it by so many properties over so many years and so many instances, so many months, days, weeks, months, years, eventually the odds catch up to you and that ace comes on the river and you get bit.
Yeah. Great way to lay it out there. Mark, are you good to wrap?
I'm good to wrap. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. What's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do? I mean, we didn't even dive into your investing career. How have you been able to do all this, go out there and help the public with this when others wish they could?
So competitive advantage on this is I basically I fell backwards into it, and then I started doing something that basically no one else has done, which is basically consolidating all the information that is on these two subjects in particular. And then it, because I became such a lightning rod for this information, I was just uniquely positioned to be a resource for it. So yeah, so I guess making that viral video, that ends up being my competitive advantage.
All right. What's one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property?
Get the heck in there. Everybody, if it's, I don't care if it's out of town, if it's roughed up, if it's, not where you want to live, it's not the right size, the bathroom's too small, dude, just get into that first property, just whatever it is. And make it a house. Don't buy a condo. I see people do that, they're like, oh, I bought a property and it's a condo. Like, no, like get yourself some dirt with that's fee simple with, it doesn't have to have a big yard, but you got to own it down to the center of the earth and up to the stratosphere, and just make it happen. Move in roommates, figure out a way, like sell wood out the back, like just get in the game, because there's way too many people who are just in analysis paralysis and they just don't like do the damn shit, and you got to do that.
Love it.
That's awesome. A lot of people give that answer, but you have a very unique approach to it. So,
Oh yeah.
what do you do for fun?
I like to run, ski. I'm a big fitness buff. I'm a dad to two kids, and so I just enjoy a lot of dadding these days. Like, they're at the age of 8 and 10 to where they still think I'm cool, and I can like play sports with them. So, family, sports, watching sports, go Ducks. Yeah, just all this stuff. I really fit into my demographic pretty much to a T.
All right. What's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you'd recommend to our listeners?
Boy, if I had to pick one self-development activity that I've been doing lately that I'm just sort of hyped on is breath work, like the Wim Hof stuff. That's something I've really loved lately. And I usually take about 10 minutes out of my day to do that because I've tried meditation and it just hasn't really stuck for me. But this breathing technique that he does, it just makes you much more mindful, very demure, as the kids say. And so yeah, I'd say that's my hack for relaxation lately, is that breath work.
All right. Besides yourself and your products, what's a resource you'd recommend to other real estate investors?
Boy, I would say whatever your niche is, whether you want to like develop industrial property, get into multifamily, buy your first house, there is a community for you out there. There's tons of communities now, maybe too many. And I really highly recommend finding the community that's doing what you want to do, like raising money. There's a community for that. Small plexes, there's a community for that. Find your community, pay whatever they want you to pay. They're all overpriced, but whatever. Just get a seat at the table, find your community, and develop your skills in that area.
All right, George, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
So I'd love if you guys would reach out to me on social media. I mean, I'm very easily Googleable. If you just Google George McCleary, you'll get all my stuff, my LinkedIn, Instagram, all of that stuff. McCleary Realty and Development is my company. You can find me on Instagram at MRD Portland. Same with TikTok. On Facebook, I'm just there with my personal name. And then my company's also, but mainly what I do is on my personal name. So, yeah, find me on LinkedIn, find me on all the platforms and send me a message. Give me a follow. I'll follow you back. And yeah, if you've got insights on like, squatting, squatters, deed fraud, the stuff that can lose us money, I'd love to hear from you. I've been hearing from people consistently for the past several months, ever since I went viral. And I love it. I do Zoom calls, just a lot like this all the time. And I'm very cagey with information that's personal. So if you ever tell me something that's personal, that's terrible, that happened to you, it's fine. It's in the vault.
Cool.
All right. Good stuff. Mark, we have Chicago Fact. Who are we playing for? Who's
We're playing
sponsoring?
for Brenda Nicholson, and today's sponsor is Kaiser Group. So, Brenda, if George or myself get this question right, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by Kaiser Group.
All right. So we're
Sweet.
recording this towards the end of September. We're getting a little heat wave over here, though. So I have
Nice.
some of the neighbors still got the pools out. Some of them you see them dumping the water in the back alley. So our question today, according to Chicago Park District, how many public pools does CPD offer to everyone in Chicago? And your options are 25, 43, 78, or 113. How many public pools are offered by the Chicago Park District?
It gets crazy hot there in the summertime, doesn't it? Like it can be like
It's
90
muggy
some
here, yeah.
degrees. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, big city, like, and this is the whole Chicagoland area, like all the
It's
suburbs and
Chicago
everything.
proper.
Just
Chicago
Chicago proper.
proper.
3 million
Chicago
people.
proper. I'm gonna go with, I'm gonna go on the low end of things. I'm gonna go with 25.
All right, Mark,
I'm
what are
going
you
to go
thinking?
with 43.
You guys undershot it. It's 78.
Oh, I thought that was too much.
Ooh.
I feel like you've asked that question before, but I still don't remember that answer.
78
No, I
public
haven't
pools.
asked that one before, but it's like one a community. It feels about right.
Yeah, I just thought there's a bunch of communities that probably got screwed.
That's not half bad. Yeah, I mean in Portland we have way fewer than that because it doesn't get like quite as like stinking hot. So
Yeah.
I was extrapolating based on how many we have, which I can think of like four. And so there's probably more, but yeah. So
All right, Brenda, you don't get the $50 gift card brought to you by Kaiser Group, but your
Throw
name
the
will
name
go
back
back.
in the hat.
You'll name it back in the hat where you could participate again in the future. So, man, that was awesome, George. That was great information. Tom,
yeah,
thank you.
man.
Listeners, share us with a friend, especially this episode. This episode is going to offer more protection for the problems you're going to come across in the next 10 years than most episodes we do. So make sure you're taking this, share this with your best friends, share this with your community if you're in a community. And we appreciate when you do so. So thank you, George. Thank you, Tom. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.